Hi. I don't know. You guys have heard me talk about the New World Order before, and you've also seen me do some religious videos lately. And I've been advertising this book that really changed my life called The Message of the Kingdom by Elijah Paul. And I don't want to say it's Gnostic, because it's not. The Gnostics, yes, it stands for gnosis, which is knowledge, but they also tend to believe that Lucifer was the liberator in the Garden of Eden and that Yahweh was the oppressor. And that can be correlated to the Sumerian clay tablets and the story that comes out of that on Enlil and Enki. And I want to read you a little bit about that story. But I've been, looking into this stuff for so long, and I'm a follower of Yahweh, not Lucifer. And so, in the way that I differentiate that, because sometimes it's hard to tell, is, first of all, is it obeying the Ten Commandments? Because that was delivered straight from Yahweh. And if it's not, then there's a good chance you're being tricked or deceived by somebody that serves somebody else. And also, does it follow the do as thou wilt, or the end justifies the means type of standard? And if it does, then that's more of a Luciferian. So I definitely don't want to call myself Gnostic, but I think that there's a seed of truth in every lie or whatever. And I'm sitting under this tree because I'm contemplating something recently that I've come across, which is orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, or also known as ORME, which may or may not be, according to some, they're theorizing, the manna of the Bible, also the philosopher's stone that the alchemists searched for. Also, it's been correlated with the tree of life, but I'm wondering if it also could be, instead of the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because according to this this website that I found that talks a lot about it, halexandria.org, it is postulating that this ORME can, and it's going to sound like total fiction, okay, but remember I have a science degree, so let me tell you what they say it can do, and then I will explain how it can do that, and then I will talk probably in a subsequent video about Manna and the storyline behind the Sumerian clay tablets and Enki and Enlil, and how that relates to, of course, Genesis and Yahweh and the Garden of Eden. But anyways, this website is saying that basically it's theoretically it can increase your psychic ability, it can activate your junk DNA, that it can extend your life, that it acts as a superconductor, because it's this monoatomic element that, scientifically speaking, it can, monoatomic meaning a single atom, an element meaning an element, which would be one of the precious metals, rhodium, thallium, iridium, palladium, platinum, or gold. So he who makes the gold he who has the gold makes the rules. There may be more to that saying, and more to the elite's obsession with possessing the gold and downplaying it to us than what they want us to realize, because apparently in its monoatomic state, the gold would be the most preferable of all those precious metals. It can, supposedly, it has these powers, at least according to their religion and the beliefs that they've passed down. So anyway, it attaches to the end of the DNA, and I don't know if any of you have been watching Nova Science Now the last few years, but our DNA are like antennae. And at the end of each strand, there's something called a telomere. And telomere shortening is the cause of aging. Now, there's an enzyme called telomerase that prevents our telomeres from shortening. And if you imagine like a shoestring with a little plastic thing at the end, when the plastic wears off, the shoestring starts to fray and you have to cut it shorter and shorter. That would be a good metaphor for our DNA shortening and leading to malfunctions of genetics and therefore aging and death and disease. So supposedly this monoatomic element, a single atom of these precious metals, would go to the end and activate telomerase, protecting our telomeres from shortening. I don't know if you notice how old some of these creepy Bilderberg, Illuminati, international banking types are. But I think one of the Rothschilds guys, I mean, what is he, like pushing 100? Look at the Queen of England. Like, how old is this chick? They're pretty freaking old. And on a side note, these precious elements are more abundant in organic foods, because when they add that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilizer, they kind of leach out the other elements. So of course, you know, organic foods are going to be more preferable. Grapes, apparently, their roots go deep in the earth and pick up more of this. So grape juice and aloe vera juice are natural sources of these monoatomic elements, which makes sense because we've all heard about, you know, resveratrol, and that actually does act on the telomeres, and we already know that. So there's like fire ants crawling on me, and I hope none of them bite me. But the point is that I've discovered this, and of course my natural instinct is, wow, ORME, okay, I want to get more of these foods. I already bought grape juice and aloe vera juice today, and I'm like wanting to drink it. But then what flashes into my mind was the story of the Garden of Eden, and how Yahweh told Adam and Eve not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They were allowed to eat of the tree of life. Now, also the story in the book of Genesis flashes in my head, the part where they were told that their lives would no longer be centuries, that their lifespan would be limited. What caused that? And so this is all stuff that's just like flashing through my head. But scientifically speaking, I think I've done a pretty good job of explaining it. It's a monoatomic element. It may or may not, you know, magnetically attract to your DNA, causing it to relax, which could apparently fight cancer, prevent aging by activating telomerase, and if it does cause your junk DNA to relax, and our junk DNA, so perhaps, you know, theoretically, if it does come from our space brothers, which is a theory that it's just there, you can't ignore it, you know, did we really just evolve from apes, or did intelligent beings come down, genetically engineer us, and part of our DNA is this unactivated space brother DNA? I mean, at the end of X-Files they talk about it. If you watch that movie No Intelligence Allowed, where Ben Stein sits down with the evolutionist, and like Ben Stein's on the side of creationism and the scientist is on the side of evolution, they basically come to a consensus where he gets the evolutionist to admit that there's a part of our genetic code that cannot be explained by evolution from anything on this earth. So basically they agree, evolutionists and creationists agree. It's really an argument of semantics. So theoretically it seems like it could work. Now when I first started reading about it, it sounded like pure fiction, because this element, when you get it, apparently it can, if you put gold into it, the gold just disappears. So the theory is, of course, what is this gold doing, going into another alternate higher dimension, or what? Now, Yeshua, who I call him Yeshua because I believe that the story of Jesus Christ is nothing more than a pagan fairy tale to keep us farther from the truth. And in that way, I am similar to the Gnostics. If I was going to be inducted into a Masonic lodge, which I never would because they worship Lucifer, and they asked me to spit on a cross, I would have no problem, because I know it's a pagan cross and it has nothing to do with the Messiah. Of course, I'm not going to worship Lucifer in turn. But the point is that Yeshua, the story has it that his mother was consuming this manna, or also known as this orbitally rearranged monoatomic element. And so when he was being born and growing up, his body was enriched in it, giving him the power to heal by touch, ascend into heaven. It was putting him basically in a higher state of being, activating this Anunnaki DNA, is what the Sumerians would say, or Yahweh seed is what Elijah Paul would say. Of course, Elijah Paul, if you get that book, it does get into the talk of extraterrestrials, and it talks about the fact that there could be many different kinds, good and bad, which correlates to the story in the Sumerian tablets of Enlil and Anki. So I'm just throwing that out there, but the first thing that's popping into my head is if I were to be able to figure out how to make this stuff, which apparently this David Radius Hudson, if you look him up, he's a farmer that discovered it. He accidentally made it on his farm out of clay and had it analyzed, and nobody could figure out what it was. He stumbled upon it. So anyway, should I take it? Is it the tree of life? Is it the tree of good and evil? Because I don't want to disobey who I serve, which is who I believe is the Most High, and to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil if I'm not supposed to. But then again, what were Adam and Eve eating? The tree of life? Were they genetically engineered by him? Is another name for him Enlil? So I'm going to turn into part 2. I'm going to read a couple verses about manna from Exodus, but mainly I'm going to give you an excerpt of Jim Marr's book, Rule by Secrecy, where he basically summarizes Zechariah Sitchen's window into the Sumerian clay tablets. Zechariah Sitchen, I haven't read his book, it's on my list, but the reason that he is important is because he's one of very few people in the world that can interpret cuneiform, which is what these thousands of Sumerian tablets have been written in. And the reason that's important, well, we'll talk about that in the next video. So tune in, where I'll give you some more actual kind of information.